Welcome back to another episode of Off-Season Grades here on the Field of 68. My name is Rob Dosser. I have with me our Big Ten expert, Mike Latulip, and we are going to be breaking down the Michigan Wolverines today. Let's get into some of the roster changes. We're going to talk about roster changes. We're going to get into who we think the X factor is for this group. And I have a feeling you and I are going to agree when it comes down to the X factor on this team, what the expectations are this year for the Wolverines and what their off-season grade will be. Roster changes. Let's start with this. The two-headed front court monster that the Wolverines had last season is now gone. Vlad Golden was, I believe, a late second round pick, and Danny Wolf was a first round pick that left his brother in tears at the 2025 NBA draft. Trey Donaldson has transferred out of the program. They lost a couple of bench pieces, but they got Roddy Gale back. They got Namari Burnett back. They brought back World Cheddar and they brought back LJ Kaysen. Is it Kaysen? LJ Kaysen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, who is a nice retention piece there, a guy that I think has a little bit of potential. And then you bring in Morris Johnson, Elliot Cadeau, Adai Mara, a guy in Trey McKinney who I really, really like with the way this is going to play out. I have a question about him that I want to bring up to you. I'm curious your thoughts. And most importantly, Yaxel Lendeborg did not go to the NBA. He did not go become a top 20 pick in the NBA draft like a lot of us thought he was going to end up being. He will be playing for the Wolverines next year. And in my opinion, Mike, he is going to be a guy that when we look up at the end of the season will be uh, at the very least in the conversation for Big Ten Player of the Year and will be at minimum a second team All-American. Is that a bold prediction there on Yaxel Lendeborg?
I don't think it's a bold prediction. Right now, Braden Smith would have the player of the year, at least preseason. He'll be the preseason player of the year for
Mm-hmm.
sure. But Lendeborg for sure. He's what I feel like is given the opportunity and how Dusty May is going to utilize him. He's going to be pretty close to a lock on that first team, likely with Trey Kaufman-Renn as well, which is crazy. But yeah, it's getting him back is because we talked about it, I think a few months ago. This was the team that was going to experience the most variance depending on
Mm-hmm.
that draft day decision or that draft deadline decision. I thought it's either going to be Michigan, the top 10 to 15 preseason team, or it's Michigan like, yeah, we like them in that maybe that back half of the second tier of teams in the Big Ten. I mean, getting him back to go along with this cast that they have in the front court and the other pieces they picked up. I mean, Michigan, it's a pretty damn good offseason, man.
Yeah. So let's talk through how this lineup kind of breaks down, right? You have Elliot Cadeau at the point. Then you have, I would say, a four-headed monster to kind of play the 2 and 3 spots between Roddy Gale and Amari Burnett, Trey McKinney, and LJ Kaysen. I personally, I love Trey McKinney. I think that he's going to end up being one of the best freshmen of this conference. I think
Yeah.
he's a perfect fit for Dusty May and the style that he wants to play. He was a guy, I remember watching him at Peach Jam, I think it was 2 summers ago, and just saying that dude has Tom Izzo and Michigan State written
Yeah.
all over him in terms of the way that he plays, and that should kind of give you the mindset that he plays with. And this new the Dusty May era of Michigan basketball reminds me a lot of what
Yeah.
Michigan State basketball is. I don't know if that's going to get me banned from ever setting foot in Ann Arbor, but it just kind of is what it is, man. It's a compliment to Dusty. And then you have Yaxel, Morris Johnson, Adai Mara, and Will Shedder to kind of uh, make it all work in the front court. I love the way this team breaks down. I love the way that they've kind of built a unit defensively that can
Yeah.
be big and physical and versatile and just so like you can go 6'4", 6'5", 6'5", 6'9", 6'9", and have all guys that are switchable, rim protector. Like it, I really love the way that this roster has kind of been built by Dusty May and the process that they had in putting this thing together.
I agree. And I think when you talked about Vlad Golden, you talked about Danny Wolf, how rare is it? And maybe some people will be like, well, Kentucky did it and some of these other schools do. I think this speaks to what Dusty May's done. Vlad Golden signs a two-way with the Miami Heat. Uh, Danny Wolf is a first-round pick. And then you go out. No one in college basketball reloaded their front court like Michigan reloaded their front court,
No.
period. Like I'm not even sure it's close. And so when you get Morez Johnson, who I think has a future in the NBA, I think we can all agree on that. When you get Yaxel, who would be playing in summer league right now. If it wasn't for his decision to come back, Mara is a guy that like maybe like you could at least say maybe at 7'3" and his size and the way he moves. So to lose those two and then re-up with 2 to 3 potential NBA guys, that's insane, man. And I think we'll get into just how this roster is going to work. Yes, you get Namari Burnett back, who's a tremendous shooter. There's definitely shooting questions across the rest of the roster. I'm not sure it matters. I really don't with this group. I think this is going to be such an elite level rebounding team that they're just going to get a lot of their misses back. So we'll get into identity and all that, but love the roster makeup. I do. McKinney's a guy that just a wrecking ball. And if I'm looking at how they work through this starting lineup, if I'm Roddy Gale, I'm like shit. Like I got my work cut out for me to stick in this starting lineup because Trey McKinney's going to be coming for that spot, no doubt.
Yeah, well, we can put a pin in that because we're gonna. I have some questions about how that ends up shaking out.
Yeah.
Before we do, I just want to. I don't know if people realize because of the fact that it was Danny Wolf and the way that he played, because of the fact that they had the 2 7-footers, because it was everything that everyone talked about with Michigan was. I don't know if the turnovers. I don't know if they can match up to teams that are going to go small and the highlights at the 4 or 5 ball screens and all that. I think one of the things that kind of went under the radar was that this was a top 15 defense in America, right? Like this was in the conversation for the best defense in the Big Ten last season. Like they weren't that far off from some of the other programs that were in the league. And now you lose. I mean, all due respect to Danny Wolf, he wasn't out there because of his defense, right? Like Trey Donaldson wasn't necessarily out there because of his defense. And you swap Vlad for Morris Johnson. You add in a guy that averaged 3.5 stocks last season in Yaxel Lendeborg. And you bring in a Trey McKinney who is going to allow you to have options where you can sit Elliot Cadeau and play that 1-2-3 of 6'5" athletic switchable wings and have Yaxel Lendeborg be the guy that kind of initiates offense for you. And when you do that and you put Morris Johnson on at the 5, like all of a sudden this looks like a team that we could be talking about as the best defensive team in America. And when you combine that with the fact that you got a NBA caliber 4-man and a bunch of vets around, like I'm telling you, man, like I think there's a real chance that this ends up being like a top 3-5 defense in America, somewhere around there.
That's not crazy at all because the thing that I was weighing with this Michigan team, and I will say Danny Wolf, I won't accept the slander for Danny Wolf defensively. Like he was tasked with some challenges out there. He got out on the perimeter sometimes and was guarding. Trey Donaldson was at least a pest. Like we'll talk about him a little bit too. Just like his departure, I think it's a little bit underrated. But the style of play, right? Because you could look at this Michigan team and say, man, the potential for them to be just a really fun, fast pace type of team with probably less turnover issues, given the fact you add Cadeau, given the fact you get Lendeborg, who was close to 2-1 at a crazy volume last year. Like, is it going to be this fun, fast paced team, or is it going to be this super elite rebounding defense pull you into the mud team? I think it's going to be the latter, but I don't think it's crazy to think that they could combine those two and be one of the best teams in America.
If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM for the season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. Go download the BetMGM app and use the code FIELD today. Well, here's the vision that I have in my head is you have this defensive team that's going to force turnovers. That's going to be a monster on the glass. Yeah. And then you happen to have Elliot Cadeau who so Cadeau's the X factor for me for this group. Right. And he absolutely has his flaws as a player, right? Like there's a reason why teams did not guard him on the 3-point line before North Carolina last year. They just stood in the paint. We called it dorking here, right? Dare the dork to shoot. That's the way that teams played him last year for North Carolina. And he still shot 34% from 3, so it's not like he can't make them. He's also younger, right? He's technically should be a sophomore in terms of his age. He reclassified him with the school early. the one thing that he does as well as anybody in the country is get out in transition and make the right play. And if you're going to tell me that you have a point guard that could run like that with a bunch of athletes on the wing, with a bunch of athletes up front, with a bunch of guys that can get out and run, and you're going to try to be a team that forces turnovers and gets blocked shots and crushes the glass and turn that into something that you do in transition, like I'm seeing how all of these dots are connecting right now for Dusty Maine. If this is what I'm seeing, I'm sure this is what Dusty and Mike Boynton and that coaching staff is seeing as well.
And you think about Yaxel too, because if you want to play fast, like you simply cannot play fast if you don't have a big that can bust out. You
Mm-hmm.
can't. And Yaxel's a guy with his ability to rebound. We saw it at UAB, get out in transition, make plays, even if it's secondary transition. He's going to be a guy like the Danny Wolf blueprint is there. It's almost like
Mm-hmm.
too easy to just kind of extrapolate it. It's pretty unbelievable to think that for what Danny Wolf did last year, you couldn't script a better guy to come into that spot.
Yeah.
Like you really couldn't.
They had Danny Wolf, and the guy that might be better is there now, right?
Exactly. And I think, the one thing with the Axel too, this is what I'm curious about, and I'm tying this into Cadeau because he is also my X factor, is, you know, that blueprint's there for sure to do some of that inverted, 4 or 5, him and Morez Johnson, middle third of the floor. But I still think Cadeau needs a good amount of reps on ball.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like relying on him as a spacer the majority of the time, although, and we've talked about it,
He
40
can't be a
points.
spacer. Like Elliot Cadeau cannot be your space. Like
No, he
for him to
can't
be
be your
effective,
spacer.
yes.
But can he be serviceable? Because like we talked about last year, where it's like, hey, 44% from three in February and March on really low volume. And the rebuttal is always, well, he wasn't guarded. Well, he's not going to be guarded this year either. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think he's developed some sort of rep where all of a sudden that's going to change.
No.
So can he at least be serviceable as a spacer? And if teams are going to sag off of him, I always look at it like, if you're going to sag off a guy that has the type of burst that Cadeau does, like now you get him on those catch and stampedes to the basket, make guys miss, get a second guy to commit, drop offs to Morez, drop offs to Lendeborg. All that I think is on the table for them. Like but being able to, I talked to Trey Donaldson about this at the Big Ten tournament last year. I was like, hey, dude, how different is it playing in this type of offense where you have a big that's kind of triggering things and keying things and he's like, it's different. It's an adjustment. And I think it's going to be an adjustment for Cadeau. The good thing about Cadeau is that he coexisted, I use the word coexisted, kind of, with RJ Davis and guys that were more kind of ball dominant, where he kind of had to be off the ball. That's why I do want to see them live in transition. And it goes back to what you talked about. The pressure defensively to force turnovers. They didn't force a ton of turnovers last year. Like this wasn't a team that won the margins very often. They weren't like a elite level rebounding team, although they did out rebound Texas A&M in the Sweet 16 or the round of 32 game last year. But yeah, like I think they'll win the margins at a higher rate this year. I think they'll out rebound teams more consistently. I think they'll win the turnover margin more consistently, and all that is good for any team, but certainly good for a team when you have like the talent that we're talking about. And I think Cadeau is a big part of that.
Yep. Is he going to make enough threes? Will he be efficient enough as a ball screen kind of hub for him? And just largely, it's not specifically him, but just kind of largely, if your offense is going to be, let's just say Yaxel Lendenberg ball screens with Morris Johnson quite a bit. Roddy Gale shot 23% from three. Trey McKinney is not a guy that's coming in with the reputation for being, a shooter first and foremost, right? I think he can make that shot, but it's not something where he's coming in as a shooter. There's a difference between a guy that can make a shot and someone that's a shooter, right? And we all kind of understand that. So with Cadeau out there, is there enough spacing for those sets to be effective, especially when Morris Johnson is not a good. If you ever see Morris Johnson take a pick and pop three, it'll be the first time that he takes a pick and pop three without getting sent to the bench. Your expectations for this group. I have Michigan as a top 10 team, right? For me, when it comes to the big picture nationally, it's Purdue and it's Houston, and then it's kind of everybody else. And you can go like 3 through 12. You can put it all in a hat and shake it up and pick them out. And I can get the argument for anyone. I think Michigan is somewhere between the 5th and 12th best team in America in the preseason. I think the expectation should be that this is the second best team in the Big Ten. I think that the expectation should be they're going to find a way to try to compete for a Big Ten championship. And look, it's Purdue's league to lose, but Michigan to me is the team that I would have as the most likely contender and most likely to take the Boilermakers off of that perch.
Today on July 7th, Michigan's the biggest threat to Purdue. Uh, Now comes the question of how you get the pieces to mesh. And there
Mhm.
was no proof of concept with the Danny Wolf thing last year until it just was. And then now you at least have things you can go back to the drawing board on and say, hey, here's maybe some spots we put Danny in that Yaxel can be in. Here's some spots we put Danny in that we want to avoid having Yaxel in. Like all those things, like you have a template to go off of from last year. I think that helps, even knowing that you haven't had Yaxel specifically in that position at Michigan.
Mhm.
So I do like that. They're probably more of like you said 5 to 12. I'd probably have them more, closer to like, 9 to 12, just because of some of the question marks. Like what
Mhm.
type of Elliot Cadeau do we get? Is Trey McKinney, like, is he the guy that we're talking about on this show? Uh, if Roddy Gale takes on a lesser role, like what type of Roddy Gale do you get? Is he just kind of become a non-factor? And then now what does that do to like, does LJ Kaysen step up? Like, there's a lot of questions, I think, in the backcourt. There's nothing truly solidified other than, hey, I think we know Namari Burnett's gonna knock down some catch and shoot looks. That's like what feels most solidified for them in the backcourt at like a really important position, right? And a really important grouping in college basketball. So that's the only thing that's kind of holding me back from saying like this is a top 5 team or this is a top 7 team. But certainly, if they put this all together, we've touched on it throughout this show. Like it has the potential to be really, really scary. So, if you become that team that I'm talking about, where you almost, I think they can be elite defensively, elite rebounding team, and that can still propel them really far. But if they mix that with the transition stuff, with getting Cadeau going, finding that blend between Cadeau on ball, Lendeborg on ball, maybe it's having Lendeborg as a 5 and Cheddar as the 4, because he's a guy that can space it more than any of those guys that are in the front court.
Mhm.
Now, like, you just have a lot of optionality with that front court and with the different pieces they bring. So to me, all of that bakes into, I think, having Final Four hopes. I think
Yeah.
that's all on the table for Michigan.
And here's the thing that I like the best is we've talked about this team going 9 deep with a bunch of guys that are either upperclassmen, have plenty of Big Ten experience, or are the kind of freshmen where we do not see an issue with their adjustment. And then there also happens to be 4 other freshmen that Michigan and Dusty has brought in. So I'm very, very high on this Michigan
Yeah,
group.
Winters Grady could be a guy that
Mhm.
steps in and knocks down shots.
And it's what 20 minutes into this video and we are finally mentioning his name. That tells you how deep
Yes.
this Michigan team. They're too deep at every spot, more or less, except for
Yeah.
the point guard spot. And by the way, their power forward might be their point guard. So, yeah, love the way this group has been put together. Give me a grade for their offseason.
I gave them just a very firm A. I think
Mhm.
the reloading that they did, like I talked about with their front court, I actually the more that the offseason rolls on, the more I just really love the buy on Cadeau. I do. I think getting a guy with a change of scenery, I think we know the tools that he has to be an impactful point guard, and being an impactful point guard in this system in particular is what has me really excited about them. And then you add McKinney into that mix, and we talked about some of the freshmen. And honestly, like the front court that they brought in, I'll keep saying it. It's as good as any in America, and that's
Yep.
that's why I have them. Coming off of a Sweet 16, getting knocked off by Auburn, I think this Michigan team has all the reason to be hopeful to go beyond that this year.
Yeah, I went with an A plus. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what else they could have done, right? Like maybe you could have gotten a higher rated point guard, but the way like with how quickly that moved, it says to me that they targeted Elliot Cadeau when they were
Yeah.
looking at him in the portal with the number of point guards that were available. You got a potential first team All American in Yaxel Lendeborg to say no to being a top 20-ish kind of a pick in the NBA draft. Like the true story, Yaxel might have been picked ahead of Danny Wolf if he had kept his name in the NBA draft this year. There's a very real chance that his name is
I
called
think he
before.
would have.
Yes.
Period. Yeah.
So you get him coming in, you get Trey McKinney, like you just, and you have some kind of retention and roster turnover with some of these guys coming back. So I don't know how you could realistically have asked for this to have been better. So I'm going with an A+ for Michigan's offseason. Listen, this has been another episode of Offseason Grades here on the Field of 68. We'll have 45 to 50 of these things rolling out here through the end of July into August, potentially into September, before we start getting into media day season, which is a monster in its own right. So for Mike LaTulip, my name is Rob Doster. Keep it here on the Field of 68 for your offseason grades.